Basically, I'm a marketing academic, and my real focus is strategic marketing. And although I teach marketing strategy and international marketing, what I try and do, I try and extend that by bringing in aspects of cybersecurity, risk management, and trying really to widen the envelope as regards what a strategic marketing individual views as regards threats in the environment. In other words, if we just look at competitors and market segments as we know them, we're going to miss certain things which are actually more likely to do damage to us, which could be internal fraud, for example, or a competitor undertaking things like counterfeiting our goods and bringing those fake goods into the market and then giving us reputational damage. So over the years, I've sort of been involved in sort of aspects of security intelligence work. And what I've tried to do through my research groups and the research projects is link more firmly the academic world and how we think of strategic problems to the real world of business. So we understand, for example, if we have software which is to detect threats and things like that, it's not only just looking at the external threats, it's looking at the internal threats of people involved in certain decisions and how they're activated to take certain actions. And as we know, the evolving world really means that today we can identify threats very clearly. Next week, the threat has changed. And I think somebody mentioned ransomware, a classic example. We think that if we pay ransomware in Bitcoins or whatever, the problem is solved. Well, that's not quite true. Ransomware now is evolving. So the idea is the programs in place will see your files deleted even if you've paid that ransom. So this has taken me forward into a different psyche of what's out there in the mind of the people committing these cyber crimes. I think we're moving into a world of a different psyche. And the issue is becoming, we're moving from cybercrime, which is predictable to some degree in the sense that we know that organized criminals are working together against certain companies, governments, to circumvent policies and things like that and take advantage. But we're now clearly moving into cyber war, where we can fully understand that threat agents, government agents, departments are fully taking advantage of some of the political ramifications. But my view is that young people today are growing up in a world which is controlled by millennials because they're good with the computers and things like that. And Generation Z, this new group that's emerging, these young people, are actually inheriting the world that millennials have really developed for them, and the frameworks in place they will inherit. So I think we're moving eventually into a different psyche within this international order. And my view is that in the next 5-10 years, we'll be looking more at cyber terrorism and how that really manifests in the way of disruption of infrastructure and things like that. So my view on this is the fact that if we really want to understand young people and how young people can be engaged, it's really understanding how they develop aspects of gaming, which is really on an individual level or within a group, and how they get the skills to take an interest in cybersecurity management. I taught
Peter,
a
just quickly,
yeah.
I don't know if you're advancing your slides, but we're not seeing them advance. So can you just click through?
I can't. I'm just talking at the moment. I'm sorry about
this. Okay,
Jeff.
that's okay. No problem. I was just making sure that we weren't missing something.
And basically, what I'm trying to say is we're moving into a different era whereby, as regards young people and what they want to learn, how they learn and share knowledge, it's a different mindset to really 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was chairman of SAGSET, and we were looking at simulations for that type of age group. So young people today are interested in artificial intelligence, but it's been imposed upon them. We in cybersecurity understand that artificial intelligence can be used to analyze threats and things like that. But also we understand that artificial intelligence is now weaponized. So again, if we look at this future, And the world that these young people who are possibly between the age of 16 and 24, 25 will inherit, we can see it's a very, very different world to the world that we understand and are represented at the moment in the way we teach, the way we solve problems and things like that. So basically, putting this idea together, I decided that it was very, very useful to really talk to young people and say to them, what is in your mind at the moment? I know you love gaming, but really, what is it that really focuses your attention? And surprisingly, they came up with the word terrorism. Now, this may be because there was a lot in the papers and on the news about terrorist acts and things like that. But I suspect it's really a question of their awareness and the fact that they're really accepting that terrorism exists, however we define it, and it's going to be part of a disruptive future. So when we talk about dealing with uncertainty, the world in the future is a different world with a different logic requiring different types of solutions. So I started to put together an idea of how I would teach young people about cybersecurity management in order to understand this evolving world. And what I did, I looked at the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center website in the US, and I looked at the different types of videos that they have there relating to maritime cybersecurity awareness, UAVs, and things like that. And the 5 videos provide a backdrop and framework for understanding really the different dimensions of cybersecurity and cyber attacks. So if we forget for the moment cyber terrorism, we can really understand that cyber security is really about preventing threats and vulnerable situations in order to stop us being disrupted. Because the attacker knows that if we're disrupted, we will pay through convenience to solve the problem, or there will be knock-on effects which cause major dislocation. And those dislocations can happen in any industry at any time. So why should a young person be more interested in moving away from playing games online, football games and all sorts of things, to really take on something like a cybersecurity simulation? And can they do it on an individual basis? Some of the experience I have in the past really related to a generation gap. And I can remember when I was running a conference, we had a simulated exercise. We put people in various groups, some of whom were in their 50s and 60s, very experienced at running paper-based simulations. And we had young people. And the young people were great in the sense that the person running the simulation, based at a university in Scotland, set it up, and young people got on with it. And the more advanced people, elderly people, were disliking it in the sense that they say, no, we want groups, we want face-to-face, we don't want to do this on with technology. And we had a major rift emerge. And so many years later, I've thought this through, and I thought, well, if young people are to be motivated to stop playing sort of online games and move to a cybersecurity simulation and play it on an individual basis, they probably don't want to play with a system that really gives defined answers. They probably want to play in real time with people that try and hack in and prevent what they're doing. And in order to understand this, I decided that really we needed to look more closely at theory, the theory underpinning human behavior. What drives a person to think in that psychological state and what motivates them? And we know that attitudinal theory suggests that we have certain aspects relating to self-empowerment, the self, things like self-esteem. And I thought to design a simulation for young people which gets them to interact, take on unknowns, and really devise solutions which are forward-looking would really help us understand and link theory and practice more logically. And of course, to do that, we have to really put our marketing hat on and think of marketers and segment the audience accordingly. And I came up with sort of 3 different audiences. The pre-university level audience, they want to be informed, they want behavioral change, they want to be motivated. The young people who probably are not highly academic, but they're good academically based, and they can link theory and practice, and they want skills and they want to go and solve problems. Then there's the university lot, and people going to university like to work in teams, they're highly competitive, and they like to do things that builds their character. So maybe that's a slightly different audience. And then there's the practitioner audience who want to be informed, they want something that's relevant, they want something necessary, and they can apply solutions. So we can start to say there are different types of audiences, and can we combine all those audiences in one simulation? I think it's possible, but in order to do that, I need a stronger academic base from which to work from. So basically, I went back to the videos on the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Centre website, and I did some sort of analysis. And I thought, well, what comes out of these videos that could be embraced in a cybersecurity simulation for young people? We need something that's going to convince people. So yes, they have specific types of attack. We also need to suggest where the targets are and why those targets exist. We also need to know, for example, what sort of code is used. And you can tell, for example, from a device, once you do some forensics, what type of code has been used, where it's likely to come from, where its vulnerabilities are. So if young people have an interest in that, the simulation could possibly turn them into wanting to produce code and things like that. Again, linking vulnerabilities to risks and the nature of cyber crime changing into cyber terrorism is something I think which is highly educational and specific to this changing world that we see in front of us. Again, there are benefits as regards getting people in a collectivist form to work together in teams and come and find unique solutions. And this can actually be done in the sense that we have a stakeholder approach whereby we identify the different groups who interrelate. And, we can think of this as regards government policy, how it's translated into regulatory forces. We can think of universities, the research expertise they have that comes into various sorts of technologies that emerge from a lab. And we can think of the social scientists who again look at the psychology of the individual. So what we're trying to say is that a simulation is not just thinking of people in a room doing something specifically, it is getting them to go through this journey of why they actually need to do something, what they need to reflect on, and how that can really encourage them to develop their self-esteem and view that, yes, they can make important decisions and get some logical consequences. And one of the things I do when I do any casework or simulations is say to somebody, look, try and convince people that you're right and your approach will work, and be confident enough to do that. And in a lot of work that I've done, I've seen young people who are very quiet suddenly understand that the boundaries where innovations occur. So if you bring in engineers, you bring in social scientists, you bring in practitioners, all of a sudden you're creating a focus for something new to emerge and to be developed. I also looked at some academic journal articles, and it was interesting that a lot of academic journal articles are very specific, but you can do some sort of analysis and take what is relevant from them. You can also look at practitioner insights, reports, and start putting together a number of, if you like, avenues which take the young person through the journey that you want to explain to them. But again, I think it's a good idea not to produce a simulation which is overcomplicated and requires them to do things which is slightly outside of the boundary of their comfort level. But again, I think it's a question really of us saying, for example, young people do want to learn, young people are very, very capable, and young people do seem to like these questions which are quite complex, almost like a conundrum, that this is a puzzle we don't quite know the answer to. How can we solve it? Now, my last thoughts about a simulation is that to make a simulation work, it has to be done in a coordinated manner. So, for example, young people, because they're at school or college or university, would normally think of the rules that apply. And I think we have to say that sometimes within a simulation, the rules may change, but we have to make that very clear to young people. It can't be like a game where people can't change the rules, and it can't be a game which is distorted by people changing the rules without telling people that this is the case. So reflecting on this, I think we can say that simulated exercises for young people have got to have certain academic criteria, certain practical oriented criteria, and skill enhancing criteria that is relevant to them and their development of self-esteem. And this is really how I'd like to finish. And I think my last concluding remark would be really to devise a simulation that is useful and will work, and not have it to be too complicated. It may be useful to develop it in stages so that after stage one, which is then tried and tested and gone through with young people, it's then refined and developed, or it's part of a more general set of simulations whereby people move to a final objective, having gone through a set of mini simulations which are very useful to them. One of the issues I would guard against is some of these online systems which are very sort of easy and predictable. I think a cybersecurity simulation has got to reflect that real world, and that real world is unkind, it's unpredictable, and it's quite violent. And as long as we put that in a logical context, I think it will hold the interest of young people. And I think what is very interesting about young people is that through word of mouth and use of social media, they actually like to explain things and explore things. So I think, Generation Z, as they will become, it is the generation that will take this forward and run with it. Thank you very much.